Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. Unfortunately, you guys get to listen to me all afternoon until you all decide to leave. That's why you paid extra. Welcome to the SQL Users Group for Louisville. Anybody here for the first time today? Ooh, that's great. If you want to get onto the mailing list, if you're not on it yet, go to the PASS website, register as a PASS member, doesn't cost anything, and then pick Louisville as your affiliated chapter. That adds you to the mailing list. I don't get everybody's email address. I have to send an email through the mail system at PASS, and it just comes to everybody that's affiliated with our chapter. So that's how you get on the mailing list. There's our website, which is where meetings and stuff end up. We have a Facebook page, a LinkedIn group, and Twitter handle. So those are all the ways that you can interact with the group if you want. Here's our meeting schedule so far for 2015. I'm going to talk today about SSIS performance. We've got some other interesting presentations already scheduled. Aaron, I didn't know what to put in there for your topic, but you can come up with something. Paul Randall and Glenn Berry from SQLskills.com. Anybody know those names? Paul Randall's name in particular. He has written a lot of books and stuff. They're going to do remote presentations for us, so that ought to be interesting and fun. We had to move Paul's to a Wednesday, so I'll send out this list a few more times over the next month just to make sure everybody understands, because on Thursday Paul's flying to Australia to teach a class. It must be rough, right? And then some other good ones. Kevin Klein from SQL Century is hopefully making a stop in Louisville in June, and we're going to try to get him to speak. There's some lightning round talks, particularly next month. We're doing a lightning talks session, so I'm still looking for volunteers who want to present for 15 to 20 minutes on some topic. If you're interested in doing that and you want to give a try speaking, let me know. SQL Saturday lineup. So here are the the close upcoming SQL Saturdays: Richmond, Atlanta, Chattanooga. Columbus is still tentative. They haven't booked their date yet. Indianapolis, and then ours on August the 22nd. So stay tuned for more news about that. But I did want to throw those up there. I know there's a couple people going to Richmond. You guys going to Richmond, maybe? Mall is? And that, I don't know. Yeah.
I'll be at Atlanta, Chattanooga, Columbus.
Yeah, I'll be at Atlanta, Chattanooga, Columbus, Indianapolis, and ours. But I'm probably not going to go to Richmond. But anyway, if anybody has questions about SQL Saturday, let me know.
Not everybody's in the room at the time, but our SQL Saturday, August 2nd, we're looking for a new venue. So if you have ideas of a place that could fit 150, 200, 150 people in a handful of classrooms, like Dave or someone's back here on the thing.
Yeah, we may or may not end up in the same place. I'm still rooting for the same place, even if we have to pay a little bit for it. But it's a nice venue. But yeah, so if anybody knows of a good venue that has classrooms and can hold 200-300 people, however many, I don't remember how many we had last year, but we might be looking. So next up, I want to introduce Aaron. For those who don't know Aaron is from Kaizen. They're our gold sponsor for the year. So I've got lots of text up here that you can read, but you don't have to, because Aaron's going to tell us about Kaizen for a few minutes.
So the marketing team's mumbo, right? So feel free to read. They're all about us. Kaizen.com is our website. But ultimately, the short story is Kaizen, we're a locally headquartered, regional, Microsoft certified partner, specifically a solutions integration partner. So we don't sell anything, any licensing. We're just helping customers make the Microsoft products work for them. I run our data platform and analytics team, so everything belonging to SQL Server or Power BI belongs to me. But we've got heads and specialties and really some of the top-notch talent in all of the Microsoft areas, other than BizTalk or some of the more obscure Dynamics products, AX and things we don't do. But we do pretty much everything else we can help you with. If you're looking for a new career we have and you're excited and want to get into consulting or looking for other opportunities, our careers website's full. We're constantly hiring and growing, both in the local market and regionally. So if you know yourself or somebody else looking for a change of career or want to get with a locally headquartered business where your CEO sits at the cubicle next to you, like mine does, feel free to come and look at us. And I'll be speaking, I guess, in May now, right? So
Yes.
Our May presentation. I don't know what I'm talking about, so I guess we'll see what.
Maybe we'll open it up for suggestions. Maybe I'll do like a survey for suggestions.
That's fine. We can talk about any number of things. So great. If you have any questions for me about Kaizen, opportunities, anything, feel free to reach out to me directly or through Dave, and I'll be here most, if not all, meetings. So.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, definitely go check out Kaizen's website. Take a look at their services. Take a look at their openings career-wise. So great company. I've known the folks at Kaizen for a long time now.
A lot of our customers are on there. Some of the projects we've worked on.
Yeah.
So if you want examples, people we've worked with, references, feel free to look at those things, and we can I can go in more detail or less.
Right.
Talk here all day.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Aaron. Some of our other sponsors for the year, Tech Systems is one of our sponsors. Mirazon is another silver sponsor that we just signed up. So if anybody knows of other companies that might want to sponsor us, let me know. We have some other like product sponsors. One in particular that I wanted to point out today is Apex SQL. Anybody familiar with Apex SQL? So they have a suite of tools that are DBA-related tools, SQL Server-related tools. One of our giveaways today is actually a universal license for all of their tools. So that is probably a $3,000 giveaway today. So I actually downloaded and used their SQL log reader tool about a month ago, because something happened in one of our application databases, and I really, really wanted to know what happened. So I went and grabbed their log reader tool, pointed it at one of our database backups, and was able to troll through all the transactions in the backup, which was pretty sweet, and figured out exactly what happened, which nobody would fess up to, but I know who did it and how it happened. So. The PASS Business Analytics Conference. So PASS has two conferences every year, the regular SQL Server PASS Conference, which will be in Seattle in October, I think, this year. And then the Business Analytics Conference is a newer conference. They've done it, I think this will be either the second or the third year, can't remember. But if you're interested in analytics, if you're interested in Power BI, if you're interested in using Excel to the max to do things, this is a great conference to go to. There will be a lot of data analytics, big data, Power BI discussions there. We do have a discount code that gets you $150 off the registration fee. So if you're interested in going, definitely use our discount code when you register. And feel free to email me, louisville@sqlpass.org, if you don't write that down or remember it. So, all right. So today I'm going to talk about SSIS performance. So this is a presentation that I've done a few times for different groups of people. So how many people use SSIS? Quite a few, right? How many people have only used SSIS because they use the import-export wizard in Management Studio? Anyone want to fess up? As I use it sometimes, right? So SSIS is a great tool, but a lot of people don't understand what drives performance of SSIS. And this presentation actually came from a real-world scenario where someone that I was working with at the VA used SSIS to grab data from an Oracle database and plop it into a SQL Server database. And then they were trying to make another SSIS package to grab that from that database on that server and do some transformation logic and put it on another server. And they were complaining that SSIS was the slowest tool ever built by Microsoft because it looked like it was only moving like 1 row per hour, right? It was their claim, right? So I was like, no, you don't understand what drives SSIS performance. So this kind of came out of that. So I'm going to kind of talk pretty quickly, I think, on 4 different things. Control flow performance, data flow performance, how you evaluate performance, and then some tips on maximizing performance of SSIS. So for those who don't know what SSIS really looks like, I'm going to open up a package real quick and then I'll go back to the slide deck. So here is a package in Visual Studio of SSIS. You've got a control flow tab, and I'm sorry if that's a little small. I don't have Zoom it plugged in at the moment, but you've got a control flow tab that has tasks, and then one of the types of tasks is a data flow task. And if you have a data flow task in your package, then you can open up the data flow task and it'll go to the data flow tab in the designer, and you see all the things that control data movement, right? So that's kind of what a package is made up of. But you can kind of think about performance in terms of the control flow, all the tasks that are running, and the data flow where data is actually moving. So I wanted to talk about those kind of separately. Control flow performance, those tasks that are in your control flow are typically limited into how fast they can run by what they're programmed to do and the environment that they're dealing with. For example, the FTP task can only FTP a file as fast as the network and the FTP server that it's on will allow it to get that file. In SSIS, you can't really speed that up. You can't turn on the turbo button on the FTP task, right? It does what it does, and you can't really speed it up too much. The execute SQL task, it will finish running as quickly as whatever T-SQL you give it finishes. So if you have an execute SQL task that's calling a stored procedure, and the stored procedure is really slow, you can't turn on the turbo button on the execute SQL task and make that happen any faster. It's going to run as fast as it runs, right? So some things you can't really do in terms of improving performance of the tasks themselves. You have to look at what are they trying to do, and how do I potentially change the environment or change things that those tasks are running, like stored procedures, to make them faster, okay? Containers, you can put tasks into containers. That will allow you to control things like parallelism. So you can run multiple tasks at the same time. They don't have to run in a serial fashion. Containers and precedence constraints are used in SSIS to control that, right? And there is a property that will manage how many tasks can run in parallel, okay? So for example, in my package over here, I just have 3 tasks and they're set up to run in serial fashion. And I've got precedence constraints. Well, my mouse is kind of jumpy, isn't it? I've got precedence constraints between them saying, okay, the second task, it can't run until the first task finishes successfully. The third task can't run until the second task finishes successfully. Those are what the green arrows are for, okay? If I wanted things to run in parallel, I could remove those precedence constraints. Now if I started this package, all 3 of those things would start potentially at the same time, okay? I can put those things into containers, into sequence containers, and have maybe 2 of them in a sequence container, and then the third with a precedence constraint from the sequence container to it. The things inside the sequence container would start first and run in parallel, and then after that entire container finishes, then the third task potentially would run, okay? So I can control parallelism by just working through the design of my package, all right? I'm going to put those back. So there is a property, however, that will determine how many tasks can run in parallel in your package. That's called max concurrent executables. It is a package property, and its default is -1. Anybody want to venture a guess as to what -1 means? No, it's actually not. It is the number of virtual or the number of processors detected by the OS -2 or +2, I forget which, right? It's plus or -2. So if you're running a and this you need to know, because you might be designing a package on your laptop or your desktop. Maybe it has 2 processors. You might configure a bunch of stuff to run in parallel, and you run your package and you still only see 2 things kind of running in parallel, or 4 things. If you've got 2 processors, and if it's processors plus 2, which I think it is, you might see 4 things running in parallel, right? And that might take a certain amount of time. When things run in parallel, but it can't run as many things as you have in parallel because of that limit, then it randomly selects which ones to start first, right? So let's say you're trying to run 8 things in parallel, but you've only got 2 processors, so it's only going to run maybe 4 of them. 4 of the 8 will start running, and then once one finishes, it'll pick one of the remaining 4 to start running, and then when another one finishes, it'll pick one of the remaining 4 and start running, right? That's how it doles out threads. Dave?
Would this override the max stop on the server?
Yes, this doesn't really, well, MaxStop is a SQL thing, right? This is inside SSIS, inside of a package, right? So different construct, right? But if I move that same package that has 8 things to run in parallel onto a server that has 20 cores, all 8 of them are going to run in parallel because it has enough cores, enough processors to be able to run them all in parallel, right? So performance of the control flow is really mostly impacted by your design. What you put in parallel, what you run serially, how you put things in containers, and you can't really affect the performance of the individual tasks too much, right? Except for the data flow task, which we're going to look at. So the data flow, like I said, is a special task. You can open up the data flow and see all of the different things that are inside the data flow. These are all the things that you kind of need to know about the data flow. You have source adapters, which connect to sources of data, and they read data from those sources. Data then gets added into in-memory buffers. Those in-memory buffers then get processed by whatever kind of transformations you might have in your data flow. And then those buffers get passed to destinations, and the destinations store the data in whatever destination you've selected, right? Sounds pretty simple, but it's not. And that's where the performance issues start coming in. So data source performance, if you think about pulling data from a SQL Server database, or pulling data from an Oracle database, or even pulling data from an Excel spreadsheet, right? That data can only be moved into the data flow as fast as the source will allow you to grab it, right? So for example, back to my friend that was pulling things out of Oracle, one of the things that he originally started complaining about was that SSIS couldn't get data out of Oracle very fast, right? And as it turns out, the user ID that he was using to log into Oracle, the Oracle DBAs had ratcheted that user ID's resources down inside Oracle. So it was only giving him so many rows of data at a time because of what the limits that have been placed on him inside Oracle. So it really had nothing to do with SSIS, right? It was a limitation on the source. So query performance, server performance, network performance, those are the things that impact your sources. So how do you tell how fast your source can give you data? Well, a simple way to do it is just to have a very simple data flow that just connects to your source or your sources, and then run that to a row count or a union all. Those are 2 different transforms in SSIS. The row count just counts the rows that are coming into it and sticks that into a variable in your package, but you don't have to do anything with the rows. The row count can just throw the rows away. A union all does the same thing. A union all can have 1 or more inputs, but the union all, basically, if you just have a source and then a union all, the union all will just throw the records into the bit bucket. It doesn't do anything with them if you don't go ahead and route its output somewhere, okay? So union all and row count are very lightweight transformations. They really don't take much in terms of processing or memory or anything. So it's a good way to test how fast can you get data from your source, is just do that with a test package, okay? From there, you may be able to go back and tweak the source and say, okay, the query I'm running inside SQL Server or Oracle, or the user ID that I'm using maybe is being hit by resource governor in SQL or whatever it's called in Oracle, right? What do I do about that? How do I improve the performance of my source? So, improving the speed of your data sources, I think there's a couple of other things that I didn't mention up here. Number one, reduce the number of columns that you have selected. This was the other thing that my Oracle friend was doing, is he was selecting from a table that had, I don't know, 100 columns maybe, and he just did the obligatory select star from, right? That was his query in Oracle. Well, SSIS has to grab all those columns and has to pull all those columns into memory, even if on the SQL Server side he was only storing 4 or 5 of them. Okay, that is all wasted memory, right? There's all kinds of data coming. So reduce the number of columns that you select. Don't do select star. Dave?
I don't know if you went to this particular classroom in Cleveland over the weekend. Somebody had written no running, no hitting, no whining, no crying, no select star.
Yeah, they had written that on one of the whiteboards in one of the rooms. So don't do select star. Don't do it when you develop. Don't do it in here either. Reduce the width and the data types of the columns. And this is part of my demo, and again comes from my Oracle friend. The table he was connecting to in Oracle had untyped character columns, which I don't really know a lot about Oracle, but I think that's the equivalent of every column being like varchar max, right? So when he grabbed that and tried to pull it into SQL Server made all of the resulting columns character 8000 or varchar 8000, right? So that's bad, right? That's just bad on the SQL Server side. May or may not be bad on the Oracle side. I don't know that much about Oracle. But instead of doing that and kind of accepting the default data types, he should have looked at that and said, okay, well, how much data are actually in these columns, and let me reduce the size of the column by casting the source columns to a smaller data type, because that's then going to allow integration services to reduce the amount of memory it has to use to store all those columns for all the rows that are coming, and I'll show you that in my demo. You know, filter the rows if you can. If you don't need them all, put a where clause on there, of course. In your data source, there is an option for either doing a SQL command or selecting a table or a view. The easiest thing to do is just leave it as table or view, and then you get a list of all the tables in your source, and you can just pick it. That is the equivalent of a select star, however. So don't do that. Use SQL command and put the query in there, okay? And then finally, if you're pulling from flat files, so comma separated, tab delimited, something like that, there is an option called fast parse. What the fast parse option does is when integration services starts, it interrogates that file. Without fast parse on, it will go through the entire file before it actually starts pulling any data, and it will verify that every row in that file, that every column has the right type of data based on what you've told it. If you've told it, oh, this is going to be character, this is going to be date, this is going to be integer, it will validate the entire file, okay? If your file is huge, that might take time. If you know that your file is valid, right, turn on fast parse. What fast parse does is it tells the integration services engine, you only have to check so many rows. If the first, I think it's 200, the first 200 rows in my file are correct, assume that the rest of it is correct, okay? So it just allows you to start getting data from flat files a little bit faster.
Would that also apply to XML files if they were on disk, or just the delimited?
I think it's only the delimited types of files, yeah, because it's the flat file connection manager, yeah. Transformation performance is where things start to get a little bit interesting, and you need to know what different transformations do and how they behave, okay? I said before, when data starts coming in from sources, integration services starts creating buffers in memory, right? And it starts feeding that data into buffers in memory. Transformations, for example, the row count, the union all, there's a whole list of transformations. There's a pivot and an unpivot transformation. There's a couple of different join transformations. There's a conditional split transformation that you can route rows down different paths in your data flow. Those are all transformations. Different transformations behave differently based on how they're designed. There are two main types of transformations, synchronous and asynchronous. A synchronous transformation works on a buffer of data and it simply uses that buffer. So for example, a row count. Row count transformation is synchronous because it just counts the number of rows on the buffer, then it turns around and hands the buffer to the next thing down the data flow, okay? Asynchronous transformations copy the data from one buffer to a new buffer. So most of the asynchronous transformations are changing the shape of the data. Think about a pivot, right? If you're going to do a pivot operation and you're going to turn rows into columns, that is actually changing the shape of the data. It no longer has the same column structure, okay? So the pivot transformation has to copy the data from one row to another row. Think about a sort transformation. A sort transformation, it has to get, let's say that there are 4 buffers of data coming to the sort. It has to get all 4 buffers before it can really start sorting that data and moving the rows onto new buffers such that they will be in sorted order, okay? Within the asynchronous category of transformations, the ones that copy data between buffers, there are 2 types, partially blocking and fully blocking. A pivot is a partially blocking asynchronous transformation. It gets a buffer, it transforms all the data on that buffer, puts that onto a new buffer, gives the new buffer to the next thing down the row, turns around and waits for the next buffer of data, right? It can work on one buffer at a time. Fully blocking asynchronous transformations like the sort cannot. The buffers stack up in front of the sort, and I'll show you that in my package, right? And until the sort transformation gets them all, it really can't start its job. So if you're sitting there watching a package in the debugger, you'll start seeing the record count will start going up right in front of the sort, and then the record count below the sort just doesn't ever start. You know, it just keeps going up, keeps going up, keeps going up until it's got all the rows. Then the sort starts doing its job, and then you'll start seeing records flow down from the sort on down through the data flow, right? So you have to know which behavior to expect out of the different transformations, okay? Some of them are just bad, like the sort. So if you can sort your data in SQL Server, for example, do it. Use an order by clause and see in your original source query to get your data in sorted order, and then tell integration services on your source, there's a way to tell your source component that data is already pre-sorted. And from that point on in the data flow, the rest of the data flow will assume that it is sorted and you don't have to sort it yourself inside your package, okay? There are some sources that you can't do that with. For example, a text file. You can't put an order by clause on a flat file. There's no engine behind it to do the order by, all right? So sometimes you have to use things like sort, but you can go to Books Online in SQL Server Books Online and go to SSIS, and it will tell you what all the different transformations are, how they behave, okay?
Can you declare a text file as sorted?
I think you can if you know that it's in sorted order. Yeah, I think you can do that. So improving the speed of your transformations. So this is kind of what my demo deals with a little bit. So eliminate things that are not needed. For example, if you can do work in a source query like a sort, like an order by or a where clause to filter things out, do it in the source query. Use the power of SQL Server's engine that's behind that, and don't do that work inside your data flow, okay? Remove unneeded columns, like I said. When you run a package, the integration services engine will look at all of the columns that are in your data flow, and it will tell you whether or not there are any columns that don't eventually get used. even if you're doing like a select column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from a source, and you run that through a union all, and then you run that through a conditional split, and then you store that data, but you're only storing columns 1, 2, and 3 in both cases, right? Columns 4 and 5 from the source don't ever get consumed. They never get used in the package. The integration services engine will tell you that when you look at the progress page of a package or the execution results of the package. It'll tell you column A on source 1, 2, 3 is not needed, right? You should take it out because it's consuming memory. Dave?
Is that just that the data eventually gets stored, or if I'm using it to, where column 4 is between this, or?
Well, if you need it for something, if it's getting used for something that is logically required, it won't tell you that that's unneeded. But if it never is, it'll tell you that, right? Optimize queries for lookup transformations. A lookup transformation is used in a data flow to go and grab records from another table and then do the equivalent of a join operation in your data flow. Records are coming from a source. You run them through a lookup, and in that lookup, you might say things like, take the customer ID that's coming through and look up the customer from my customer table. The lookup transformation, you can configure it several different ways, but by default, it just runs the query that you specify is the source of the lookup, and it caches all of the data into memory, and then the data flow starts, right? So you need to optimize those queries, because if you have a really slow query that's the source of your lookup, it's just going to sit there and take longer for the lookup to finish caching stuff before the rest of the data flow can really start. Okay. There is a transformation called the OLADB command transformation. A lot of people use it to do updates. In SSIS, there is no bulk update capability, right? SSIS does inserts. So if you're trying to take a bunch of data coming through a data flow and you want to update a table, a lot of people use the OLADB command transformation for that, because you can specify an update statement and you can map the columns that are coming into the OLADB transformation to columns in your table and tell it how you want those to be updated. The challenge with the OLADB command transformation is that it runs one row at a time. So if I have 10,000 rows coming through, my SQL Server engine is going to see 10,000 update statements of one row at a time. That plays havoc with things like the transaction log, right? So the better way to do it is to land that data into a staging table of some type or a temporary table of some type, and then back in the control flow, run an execute SQL statement that just does a set-based update, okay? And then reconsider your data flow. I'm going to talk about destinations, and then I'm going to do a demo.
Is there any way, Dave, to combine, you got a lot of lookups, so you're not having to, let's say you got 20 things you're transforming, so you're looking up keys and what different keys and whatever. That takes a lot of time over time, even if it's in memory. Is there any way to combine those to eliminate some of those?
Not really. If you tried to combine them, then what you're going to end up with is a lookup that kind of has the Cartesian product of like two different tables, right? You could Cartesian join them together so that you got every possible combination of both of those. And then you could use the keys from both of those as the lookup, but you're going to end up probably making the problem worse, because the Cartesian product will give you a lot of combinations that are probably never going to be seen in your lookup, right? So it's like the classic problem of you've got 1 million customers and you got 1,000 products, but any given customer only really has ever bought 5 products from you, right? So I don't know of a way to eliminate that. All you can do is try to optimize it as much as possible. So, question in the back?
Yeah. In the sequence of events for the lookup transformation, so first it caches everything, and then starts with the source data and goes and does the lookup on that.
Yes.
Not for like a redirect.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That's why that's kind of why it does that to try to do it as performant as possible. It grabs all the data from the lookup table and just caches it into memory. That way it's in memory and it can do very fast memory-based lookups against that and not have to query the source every time. So you can tweak the way it's configured, and you can make it go to the database every time for every row that needs to be looked up, but it gets slow. Right? Question?
You can't pin that up there in memory either, can you? That lookup.
No, not really, but there is a thing in integration services called the cache connection manager. You can use a lookup to load a cache connection manager, and even after the data flow that is in ends, the cache connection manager still has the data in memory, and you can reuse it for another lookup in another data flow, right? So it's kind of a way to do that, but you can only really do it with that cache connection manager and lookups. You can't really use that for anything else, and it's not updatable, right? So like in one data flow, if you're populating a cache connection manager with a lookup, and then you get to 3 data flows later and you want to reuse it, if anything's happened in the source, the cache can't be updated.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the thing talk about. We got a lot of dimensions.
Yeah.
Real things, they typically don't get updated.
We have the same problem. Yeah.
I want to know if there's anything new that can happen.
No, not that I know of. But cache connection managers, can help,
I think we actually
right?
looked at that.
Yeah. Because like a quick example at the VA, we have a staff dimension that contains every person that works at the VA. Well, some of our fact tables list 9 different doctors that dealt with that patient. The primary care provider, the nurse, the whatever. So in those types of instances, we use a lookup to populate a cache connection manager, and then in the data flow that's actually dealing with that fact table, we just reuse that cache connection manager for all of the lookups. Kind of works. So, is there another question?
One more thing on the lookup caching. I've seen cases where if you don't have it partial or full, or you don't have the right option there, it won't find it.
Yeah.
Because you haven't got it cached.
Yeah, that can happen. Yeah, that can happen. So, was there another question? So destination performance, and I really want to get to my demo. Destination performance. Destinations in your data flow, insert records somewhere, right? That is limited by how fast the server that you're connecting to or the thing that you're connecting to can accept the data from you, okay? So understand just how to optimize that. For relational sources, you need to understand your bulk insert options. Can you do a bulk insert against that table, for example? There are bulk insert options, or it's called fast load in integration services. Turn on the fast load options on your destinations and see if that works, right? Of course, there are some destinations like Excel. You can't fast load into Excel, right? It is what it is. But you can fast load or bulk insert into SQL. You can fast load into Oracle. There's lots of destinations that you can. Also understand how is indexing going to affect that, right? If I'm trying to insert data and I'm trying to insert 1 million rows into a table that has 15 indexes on it, then obviously that's going to be slower than if I were to drop all those indexes, insert the data, and maybe rebuild the indexes. It all depends, right? It's no clear-cut answer, but you just kind of have to know what you can get away with to try to improve the performance of your destinations. Some other things, I mentioned fast load. The other thing about destinations is make sure that whatever the data types are that you're using in integration services, that they line up with the data types of your destination, okay? So if I'm inserting columns 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and in integration services, I have those columns identified or defined because maybe they came from the source this way as all varchar, but then in my table, column 5 is actually a date and column 4 is actually an integer, right? And let's say I don't have any data in my data flow that will break those data types, so it'll all work, but SQL Server in their destination is going to have to spend time doing data conversions, right, to get that data pushed into the right data type format for the destination, okay? So if you can change the data type in your data flow, that is a very fast operation inside integration services. So there is a data conversion transformation that allows you to just flip the data types on things. Obviously, if you have something that's not a date and you tell it to convert that to a date, it's going to cause an error. But if you can do it, go ahead and make sure your columns all line up in terms of data types. Other things to consider. So I'm going to do a little demo here. So this is a very elegant demo, by the way. So here is, so I've got a master package here that just starts some auditing, truncates some tables, and then it either runs a bad child package or a good child package based on a parameter, okay? And then it ends its auditing. So I'm going to start by showing you the bad child. So here was potentially the requirement that somebody gave me. They said, okay, we've got this table, and we want to grab all the data from this table, and we've got these lookup values in Excel, and we want to take those lookup values in Excel, and with the data that's coming in, the third column in that data doesn't line up to those lookup values exactly, but we need to pull the first two characters off of that third column, and we need to match it with our lookup column in Excel to get the value that's in there. And then we need to sort that, and we need to store it all sorted, and we need to count the rows. And we also want to do an aggregate so that we know how many rows got stored for each of the lookup columns in our Excel spreadsheet. Okay? So that was pretty close to the real scenario. So, here's how I might design that. Okay? So I've got this source component, and you'll see I've got an OLEDB connection manager, and I just left it as table or view. Already a bad move on my part, right? But I left it as table or view, and I just picked my big source table. Here's what I get, a bunch of columns that are named appropriately, right? All right. So then on column 3, I'm going to use this derived column transform thing. Oh, it's actually the first column from column 3. And I'm going to do a substring on column 3 and pull off the first column off of column 3. And I'm going to call that column 3's left character. So that's a new column in my data flow, okay? And then I'm going to convert that to an integer because I happen to know based on my requirements that the third column contains numbers, and I just want the first number. So I'm going to convert that to an integer. And then I'm going to sort the whole thing, okay? Because I'm going to use a join. I'm going to join the data coming from my lookup table in Excel with the data coming in here, and a join operation. So this is going to be a left outer join between my source and grabbing that column 3 beginning int, which is now an integer, and I'm going to line it up against my key column in Excel, and I'm going to grab out these other columns from Excel. But a join requires that its inputs be sorted. Okay, that's just the way the join works in integration services. So I have to sort this. Here's my Excel spreadsheet data, so we'll look at the preview of that. So here are the key codes, and here are the lookup values that I actually want to store in my result, right? So I'm going to pull the first character off of that third column, and I'm going to line that up with the numbers 1 through 9 plus a 0, and I need to store things like I love SSIS, okay? But of course, I have to convert some of those because in Excel they just look like character data because I didn't do anything to make them look otherwise. So I have to make sure that that key code column is an integer, and in Excel everything comes through I think as a nvarchar or a wide string format, so I don't really have that defined that way in my database, so I'm going to convert that too, and then I'm going to sort that, and then I'm going to join it, and then after I get done joining it, I'm going to fix instances where my lookup failed because maybe I end up with something in the third column that the first character isn't really a number, so I'm going to handle that scenario. Then I'm going to do a multicast, so I'm going to make 3 copies of that data. The first copy is going to go right into my destination table, okay? which has mostly all of the same columns that are from my source. I'm also going to aggregate and create a count grouped by my sorting column, that 1 through 9 plus 0, to count how many rows matched each of those, right? And I'm going to store those in another auditing table called big source counts. And then finally, I'm going to count the number of rows and put that into a variable in my package. So, sound like a reasonable plan?
Question, you said you, in case it's not a number, you'll have that to catch it. If it's a null, is that going to trigger that?
Yeah, it would catch that too, I think. I put is null, I got nothing,
Okay.
right? So, yeah, I think it would catch it, right? So we're going to, over here on the SQL side, notice that I've got 20,000 rows in my big source, all right? I don't have any in big destination right now. I don't have any auditing. I'll come back to this strange lookup values table here, right? But remember that right now my strange lookup values are in Excel, okay? So I'm going to run this, and hopefully it won't blow up on me. I am having a problem with Excel on my machine, so it might throw an error, might not. And my row counts are not updating correctly because I've got some Visual Studio issues, so don't worry about the row counts. But it did say that it finished, okay? So if I go back over here and refresh, I now have 20,000 rows in my destination. If I look at, say the top 1,000 rows, you'll see that I ended up with my lookup values, right, coming in from Excel. So, okay, so that ran okay. Let's look at my auditing. So to move that 20,000 rows basically took 12 seconds on my laptop, which is actually a lot faster than it did last night. But the gods are with us, right? So what could I do to improve that? Well, first and foremost, if I go and look at my execution results, I wanted to show you this is where you'll see things like, warning, the output column, column 3, is never subsequently used in the data flow. Get rid of it from the source. If you're never going to use it, get rid of it, right? So these are all the warnings that it gives you, and you can copy these, right, so that you can see them outside of here. You can right-click on that and say copied message text and paste it into Word or Notepad or whatever. So there's some things that we could get rid of, but anybody have any ideas about how we might just do this differently? Because 12 seconds didn't seem like it was very long for 20,000 rows, but what if I needed to move 20 million rows, right? That would be really bad, okay? That would be kind of bad performance. And the Oracle guy that I was talking about, he was trying to move, I think, 100 million rows. So, and this was kind of his package design, right? So that's why I started looking at it, and I was like, well, first and foremost, that's a bad idea, right? We should change this to SQL command, and we should put in only the columns you need in a select statement. You don't need to grab all of those columns, right? The second thing that I noticed was, if I start looking at these source columns, look what it says. It's a string of length 8,000, right? Every column in this table is a character, or is a 8,000 string, or an 8,000 length string. Think about the memory that integration services has to throw up in a buffer to store that, right? It's only probably going to be able to store like 10 or 12 rows per buffer because they're so wide. Even though the data that's there is really tiny. If I went and looked at it, it's really tiny. So, that's a bad idea. Doing a join that requires sorts is a bad idea because there is a lookup transformation that doesn't require sorted data. So I should really change this to a lookup transformation, right? And then doing some of these other things like splitting the data to do the counts, I could do that in SQL with a group by after the fact, right? I don't have to do that in integration services. After I get done storing the data, I could run a query that just does a group by that will run faster than this aggregate can run, okay? So after looking at that for a little while, this is what I came up with. So same auditing to start, But before I actually move the data that's in that big table, I actually go ahead and stage the lookup values into a table in SQL. So first I truncate that table to make sure there's nothing there, but then I just do a data flow that says grab the lookup values, convert the columns as needed, and put them into a staging table or a lookup table in SQL Server. Then I come back to my data or to my control flow and I actually move that big table. Here's all I need to do to move that data. First and foremost, I'm using a query, right, just to get the columns that are needed, and I'm doing some conversions in my query, okay? Then I'm doing my lookup, and I'm using my table that I created to drive the lookup, which now has my Excel data in it. I still need to do a derived column to catch anything that didn't hit my lookup. And then I'm counting the rows because I need the variable for my auditing, and I'm storing them. And then after that's done, I'm doing a group by, and I'm just inserting into my auditing table a select from my destination with a group by. So that's going to get me all my counts, right, based off of that. So if I go and change my project parameter here and tell it to run the good package, now I'll go back to my master. Okay, it's done. Right? I couldn't even get to the data flow fast enough because it finished already. So if I go back over here and look now, let me re-execute this. Okay, running the good child, it moved 20,000 rows in 0 seconds. Right? So sub-second time to do the exact same job. Right? Simply by rethinking the problem. And that's what I see most of the time, right? People will design packages based on some requirements that they have. And yeah, what they design in their data flow might make perfect sense based on just, okay, first we got to do this, then we got to do this, then we got to do this, then we got to do this, right? But if you think about it a little bit different, you might be able to cut some of that out, use SQL Server and its power to do part of that, use other components and get rid of the ones that are maybe asynchronous, the ones that are fully blocking, like the sort, for example, right? Start looking for things that you can do differently, and that's the whole idea. So, evaluating performance. How do you evaluate that? Well, you can use package logging to do that inside integration services. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about this, but the thing to know about is with integration services logging, sometimes it's a little hard to see the forest for the trees because you get a lot of events get logged. So you might consider building your own custom logging to track things that you want to track in your package, right? So you might end up doing that, but you really need to look at the total times that it's taking for your transformation to run, your data flow to run. Here are some of the things you can look at from a package logging perspective. Bye, fellas. Sorry, I'm running a little late. So you can look at that. The data flow properties that you can review are some of those. I'm going to put this up on our website. You can use perfmon. There are some SSIS specific counters you can look at. Assuming you're pulling and pushing to SQL Server, you can use perfmon and profiler for that as well. And then some ways to optimize. Parallelize, optimize your queries, your sources, your lookups, optimize your writes to your destinations, eliminate environmental bottlenecks, and really rethink your package designs. That's the big one, right? So, I know that was fast. Sorry we were running a little late because the pizza got here a little bit late. But what I'm going to do now, yes, you can ask questions, and I have a few giveaways.
Batch size and commit size are the two parameters which I found it very useful.
Yes, batch size and commit size on destinations. Control, if you're going to do bulk inserts, control the size of the transactions and the size of the data being bulk inserted, right? So yes, you can absolutely play with those and affect how quickly data goes into SQL Server particularly, right? Other questions?
Well, just comment on this. I would say that we got a lot of work today. And the Unity driver to me is like twice or 3 or 5 times faster.
Yes, that is another thing. If you are using Oracle, There is an additional driver from Untitled for integration services, and it is a lot faster than the regular Microsoft OLEDB provider for Oracle. Same thing for Teradata. They have a Teradata adapter. So if you're using Teradata, you could do the same thing.
Those are also enterprise SQL features.
Yes, they are. They are enterprise.
Enterprise.
Yes, they do. Yep. Okay, so real quickly, because I know everybody needs to go, I've got 3 things to give away today. I've got a book, which I've kind of found out that publishers are really not giving away very many books anymore. So my number of books is dwindling pretty quickly. So, but I do have 1 book. I have 3 1-month passes for Pluralsight. Anybody use Pluralsight for training? So these are 3 1-month passes for Pluralsight. You can use them 1 month right after the next. So it's 3 months of free training, if you will. And then I have the Apex SQL Universal License, which is all of their tools for a year. So, so Aaron, give me a number between, and some people I know have left, so we may just have to call out numbers until we get a hit. But give me a number between 1 and I think 32 or 33 was how many we had today. 26. So Lewis, first winner. Did Lewis leave? Oh, that's okay. Give me another one.
6.
6. Kenny, which one do you want? I'm going to do the Apex SQL last. This is training. Okay. All right, so Kenny, you get to pick the next number then.
All right.
And this
Last number?
last number was 6.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh,
32, whatever the last number.
32. Okay, 32. Satish. Satish still here? Or did Satish make it today? Okay, sorry, Kenny. Pick another one.
First number.
Number 1. Lucas. I'm going to give you the book. I'll do the Apex SQL thing last. All right, so Lucas, pick a number. 17. 17. Why can I not find 17? Okay, there we go. Tim. Krivitz. Okay, so sorry I ran a little late. Pizza got here a little late. If there's anything else left to eat out there, please grab it on your way out. Take a lollipop, please, for Valentine's Day. Give it to your kids if you have them, because I don't want to take them home with me. And we will see you guys next month on the 12th, lightning rounds. So if anybody's interested in participating, let me know. 15 to 20 minutes on whatever topic you want. Okay? Thanks for coming, guys. All right.
All the receipts so that they know there's
Oh yeah, that's fine.
$100. I mean,
No worries.
in case for some reason they didn't work or
No worries.
something like that.
No worries. I appreciate you guys coming. Yeah. Really, it's kind of in the middle. I'll tell you that it's true. Because, you know, and what I see most are people that are working on data warehousing projects. They will use SSIS a lot to grab data and pull it into their data warehouse environment. That's what we do at the VA.
Okay.
Right. So, but developers use it a lot of times to move data. Anybody that kind of needs to move data from point A to point B can use it. Sometimes it's EDA type resources, sometimes it's data warehousing, BI types of folks.
Right.
So it just.
And I've seen it just on my I've seen it all. That's good to know because sometimes that's a requirement.
Right.
Positions we work on.
Exactly.
I'm seeing it as a developer in the source space.
Yep.
And I'm like,
Yeah, it is. Yeah. There's some other competing products that you might see people mention, like there's one called Apptio. There's another one called Informatica. SSIS is just kind of Microsoft's version of a data movement tool.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So the position right now that includes
That includes that.
data warehouse and SSIS.
Right,
So that's
yeah.
why I was asking that.
Yeah, I spent probably
One room.
4 years at the VA. I'm not in charge of that team anymore, but at the VA there's a team of 8 people. That's all they do.
Okay.
Is SSIS work to populate the data warehouse at the VA.
Okay.
Pull data from places.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, we,
Okay.
we had a couple positions like that.
Go ahead and,
If you ever worked on
send that to
being
us,
a military
or just
professional,
line or whatever.
they titled their job just
Oh, you
as
didn't?
a job description. They're more of like a business intelligence analyst.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. BI analyst, BI developer, BI. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
well, thank you. That was
Okay.
helpful.
Good. Okay. Good. Thanks for coming again.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Let us know if you need anything else.
No, I think I'm
For the
good
next
for right
meeting.
now. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I wonder if you buy it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. They're all still there. What's your name?
David.
Okay, yeah, we'll just call them and say hello. They're all still there. Okay.
Their neighbors, okay.
Don't worry. We'll tell them you say hello. They're all in the office today.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So a lot of them are more like, diagnostic. It's the same side.
Okay.
Yes, it's a and we still 2007.
I know.
Yeah.
They use it
I know.
next version of it.
Yeah. What version of SSIS? Okay, 2012 still, are you using Visual Studio 2010 or Visual Studio 2012? Okay. Okay, try that. Try that, because I think Visual Studio 2012 will at least allow you to install a newer Excel provider. Visual Studio 2010, I don't think you can see it
So I don't know how.
because it's the Excel 2013 driver.
One more problem, this is not related to this one. There's one more. On a different server, which is SQL 2008
Oh, yeah.
and then Excel is starting to retain Excel, but we are using the same connection. It runs okay when you run manually with SSIS runs okay. When you put it on an agent job,
It fails. So it's probably a 32-bit versus 64-bit driver problem, right? The Excel driver that's installed is probably the 32-bit driver on the server. So in SQL Server Agent, after you pick your package, one of the other tabs allows you to specify that the package needs to be run in 32-bit mode, which is the same way that it runs in the debugger. In the debugger, it always runs in 32-bit mode. So look in SQL Server Agent and see if you can find that flag and turn it on and see if that solves that problem for it. Yeah. Yeah, Excel is a real pain in the, Excel is really a pain in the, really a pain.
it is.
Yeah, Excel is
so
just bad.
surprised because they're all Microsoft.
I know.
And then they don't talk to each other.
That's okay. This is just my password, but Louisville at SQLpass.org just comes to me. So you can send an email to that, and it'll come to me. So if you have other questions like that, just I live right outside of town, down near Fort Knox.
You work at Fort Knox.
I don't work down there. I just live down there. I actually work for the VA. Yeah, I'm a contract resource for the VA, so I mostly work from home and then travel a lot. So,
Yeah,
okay,
I own a
good.
company here called Data Redeemers.
Oh, you do? Oh, very
We
good.
are, I wish I had my card.
Oh, that's okay. Shoot me an email with your contact information. Yeah,
And we're completely data warehousing, business intelligence,
that's
data
cool.
analytics, data integration kind of projects we've been
That's cool.
doing. And my company ran okay for the last 8 years.
Right.
Initially, it was just my resume started the company.
Right. Yeah.
Now we have people
Yeah,
doing
more resources. Yeah.
Recently merged with another company locally called 8-Bit Information Systems. They are basically IT staff.
Oh, okay.
And a friend of mine runs that, and we merged just as of December.
Oh,
So that opened up some opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Looking for great talent.
looking for resources.
Great talent.
You know, in terms of data warehousing and BI,
Yeah.
Louisville's not the best.
Well,
There's not a lot of resources around the Louisville area.
I had
really
to, I
know.
had to, more people.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. There's not a lot of people around who know it. So, yeah, I'd love to get your contact information. Okay, that's great.